Fine. So what we'll do is in today's session we'll try to understand a few topics before we get into the application. So if you can understand few relevant points which we should aware to start with the system, that will help us to work on the environment without any confusion. So first what we'll do here is, so we'll talk about fusion security. The fusion security here we call as role based access control. Okay, role based access control, call as RBAC. Okay, we'll talk about role based access control. After this topic we'll talk about fusion users. Okay, what are the different type of users we have in terms of users classification, the fusion applications, we'll talk about that. After fusion users we'll talk about what is the architecture we have in the fusion applications. Okay, say Oracle fusion architecture. Okay, what is a fusion architecture, we'll talk about it. And by following that we'll just talk about enterprise structure also. Oracle fusion enterprise structure. Okay, so we'll have these topics as a today's agenda, and after discussing these, if time permits, we'll talk about few other topics also. Okay.
Hey Lakshman.
Yeah.
I hear some background noise, like messaging thing or something like that. If it is from you, can you please move?
No. Participants are joining. Okay.
Okay.
We are getting it. Hope it won't be going forward. Okay. Okay. Fine. Done. So first we'll talk about role-based access control. Okay. So before that, we'll see how we can manage the security in EBS. In Oracle EBS. So when you talk about security, user access for anything, what we do, we can give any access to the user through responsibility. Within the responsibility, we can have a menu. The menu consists of submenus. Okay, so we'll see those points. When I talk about EBS, basically we can have menus for each application. So we can find seeded menus as a part of standard product, and the menus consist of submenus, right? So within the submenus we can have functions. So if you need access to specific submenu or menu, what we have to do is, okay, if you need access to specific menu, directly we can create the responsibility. Within the responsibility you can select the menu for which menu you want to give the access to the user. If we require access to specific submenu, so directly we cannot select submenu into responsibility creation. So against the submenu we have to create the menu. That menu only we can assign to the responsibility. That means to have access to specific menu or submenu or selected functions, okay, we require responsibility. Okay, we require responsibility. Say we created one responsibility by selecting the specific menu or submenu or list of functions. So just because of the responsibility, user cannot record the transactions. That can be GL responsibility or subledger related responsibility. Okay, so any responsibility, take example as any responsibility, user cannot create any transaction. Just say we created responsibility for AP, for example. So we created AP responsibility. So if you want to allow the user to create the transactions from AP responsibility, what are the additional setups we have to do? Okay, after creating the responsibility, what we have to do? Anyone please? This we know very well.
We need to assign to the user.
Yeah, we have to assign to user. Say the responsibility is assigned to user. Still you cannot record the transactions. What else we have to do? Anyway, setups we have to do related to that.
trigger.
Apart from that,
Profile options.
yes, we have to set the profile option. When you talk about profile options here, primarily we can talk about, so we have to assign, okay, we have to assign operating unit. Okay, when I talk about subledger related responsibility, we have to assign operating unit to responsibility, so that, so from that responsibility we will be able to record the transactions for specific operating unit. Okay, we assigned. After that, this combination we have to assign to user, right? So this is what we follow. So directly we cannot have access to menu or submenu or function. So to have access to specific menu or submenu or selected functions, we require responsibility. Okay, to have access to any one of these menu or function or submenu, we have to create the responsibility. By creating the responsibility, we cannot create the transactions. If it is GL responsibility, we have to assign the primary ledger. If it is AP responsibility, along with the ledger and all, we have to assign primarily operating unit. We know subledgers, when you talk about AP will be standing at OU level as per multi-org structure. So we have to assign the relevant access. So the AP responsibility. So that means the AP responsibility will have access to operating unit, specific operating unit. You may assign, say, ABC operating unit. That means from AP responsibility, you will be able to create the data or transactions for ABC operating unit. So after that, what we have to do? So we have to give the access to specific user to create the transactions for the particular operating unit, which operating unit is associated with the specific responsibility. For that reason, this responsibility, first we have to create responsibility, then we have to assign that operating unit to responsibility, then that responsibility we have to assign to the user, so that user can access to the system through this responsibility. Against this operating unit, user can record the transaction. The same logic will be implementing in the fusion also, but just the naming convention slightly they changed. These points we have to understand. Okay, so the same logic, whatever we are discussing, how user can have access, through what user can have access, what we have to assign to responsibility, and equal to menu, submenu functions, what we have in the fusion applications, we have to understand. So that concept we are calling as role-based access control. Do you think we have a role-based access control functionality in EBS? Anyone, please?
It's there in database, right?
Yeah, database. Okay, that database is the one. And in terms of
we also
application,
approve for approvals.
Exactly. So we have role-based access control in EBS also. In EBS also we have, but you can find that role-based access concept, RBAC concept, mostly in web applications. Okay, mostly in web applications. Okay, rest of any privileges for any user will provide through responsibility concept only. Okay, take simple example in EBS. When you create, if you want to create the bank account, you have to provide the roles, or you have to provide the grants to legal entity to act as a bank account owner. And if you are going to set up the approval management, AME, if you are going to work on AME, for specific user, you have to provide the rules to configure approval related rules. So the role-based access control concept we have in EBS also, but that is limited to very specific applications, which are web applications. Okay, the application which will be managed, for which application functionality can be managed through forms. For the form based applications, always we just go with the menus and these concepts only. But web based applications, role based access control, we are using in EBS also, but it's very much limited. Now in the fusion applications, the fusion applications completely will be running on web based applications. Now there are no forms in the fusion environment, So you go on just when you are going to work on payables or receivables or GL or any application. So all will be running web-based forms. That is the reason what they did is they completely moved from this menus, submenus concepts to roles concept. Okay, so here the point we have to understand, in the Fusion applications we don't have a concept called as menus and submenus. Equal to that, they introduced roles concept. So when you talk about role based access control, okay, what are the key points we have to understand, how those are similar to EBS menu, submenu functions, and these points we'll see that. So basically the roles here in EBS we have menus. Equal to menus we have a roles concept in the Fusion. What are the different type of roles we have, we'll see first. Then we'll discuss about how those are different, how those are similar to these points. Fine. So when I talk about role based access control, basically we have a 4 type of roles in Fusion applications. Say job roles, duty roles, and data roles, and abstract roles. Okay, we have 4 type of roles. So here in EBS we have menus, submenus, functions, responsibilities, and for the same responsibilities we assign the operating unit. If it is subledger related application, if the responsibility is related to GL, we assign primary ledger to the responsibility. Finally the responsibility we assign to user, so that user can have access to responsibility by connecting to the specific data, means operating unit or GL. The user can record the transactions, right? This is how it works in EBS. The same how it will happen in the Fusion. So when you talk about job roles, the job roles, when you compare with EBS, the job roles are equal to menus. Okay, job roles are equal to EBS menus. In EBS we have menus. So when I talk about payables, okay, AP navigate GUI 12, we have a menu for payables. In the same way, in Fusion we have a job roles. So Fusion job role is equal to EBS menu. Hope everybody is aware of menus in EBS. And in Fusion we have a duty roles. The duty roles are equal to EBS submenus. Okay, job role, Fusion job role is equal to EBS menu. Fusion duty roles are equal to EBS submenus. And data roles. So these data roles are equal to this. Okay, the data role is equal to, if you assign, okay, and before that any role is equal to responsibility. Okay, we give the access to user. In EBS what we do is, for any user need access to anything, through responsibility concept only the user can have access. In Fusion any user can have access to anything through role concept. That means another way you can compare, the role is equal to, okay, the role is equal to responsibility. EBS Fusion role is equal to EBS responsibility. Okay, in the Fusion what are the role we have, which role I am not talking about. When you talk about which role, again the job role means that is equal to menu, duty role is equal to submenu, but just role. A Fusion role is equal to EBS responsibility. Okay, again we have a different type of roles, and when I talk about responsibilities, we have a different responsibility in EBS also. Okay, so in the Fusion, role is equal to EBS responsibility. In EBS, if you want to have access to anything, we require responsibility. In the same way in Fusion, if you want to have access to any functionality or any application related functions, we require role. And here we have a different type of roles. The based on the role you can compare that is equal to which menu or submenus. Okay, so job role is equal to menu, Fusion duty role is equal to submenu, and data role. in Fusion we have a concept called as data role. That data role is equal to EBS responsibility. If you have a just responsibility, you cannot perform any transactions. To that responsibility, you have to assign your primary ledger, okay, or operating unit. If it is GL responsibility, we have to assign the primary ledger. If it is the responsibility is related to subledger applications, along with the primary ledger, you have to assign operating unit. That means after assigning this primary ledger and operating unit to any responsibility, the user can start working on the application for the specific application. The responsibility belongs to which application or the application related access the user can have, and they can record the transactions. Let me say this could be GL or AP responsibility. Equal to this, we have a data role. That means the data role means it's all about assigning the primary ledger or operating unit to specific role. Okay, so here just to understand, so data role means, okay, data role means job role plus primary ledger if the data role is related to GL. Okay, if data role is related to AP, in that case that you can take as job role plus BU. The EBS operating unit in Fusion we call as business unit. Okay, operating unit, whatever we have in EBS as a operating unit, that we call as business unit in Fusion applications. It's OU as per EBS. The same we find in Fusion as a BU. There are few other points which you have to understand that we'll see at the time of system configuration. Just for now, the just simple point we have to understand, in Fusion operating unit we call as a business unit. That's all. Okay, data role means there will be one role. Which role? Job role. The job role will have access to specific primary ledger or business unit. In case of EBS, for specific responsibility, we assign operating unit or primary ledger. In the same way, in Fusion, equal to responsibility, we have a role. Okay, so that primarily which role? Job role. Okay, for menus only will be doing that assignment, right? Menu only will take into responsibility. To responsibility only we assign primary ledger or operating unit in EBS. Similar to that, here we call as data roles. So here, if you want to understand EBS point of view, the ABC operating unit is some set of data. That means this responsibility, through this responsibility, user can create the data for this operating unit. That means we are giving data access. Okay, here also data role means there will be one role, specific role. Okay, that may be payables manager or receivables manager or general accountant. Similar to menus, there will be one role. The role require access to specific primary ledger or business unit. Okay, the combination of role and primary ledger, or if the role is belongs to subledgers, the combination of role and business unit only we call as a data role. Okay, so this is the point we have to understand when we talk about abstract role. Here these are the common roles. Okay, if any user is going to work on the system, they require some common privileges. If anybody is working on the system, definitely they'll be working as employees in the organization, so they need some access to self-service functions, so to see their pay slip information and to see their some other HR related information, and to run some requests as a some schedule process to run the reports. They need some common privileges, so that role we call as abstract role. It's nothing but common role, okay, which is required for any user who will be accessing the system. The best example for common role is this abstract role is employee. Okay, so these are the three roles basically you have to understand. This is just additional classification which is applicable for employee. So whatever the role you see in the application as employee, that role falls under abstract role type. That's it. Okay, why they just give an employee role as abstract role? That is a common. So you may have an employee in the system who will be working for payables or receivables or any application. So you have to use the role called as employee role, abstract role. Abstract role means common role which is required for any user who will be accessing the system. Okay, that is the point which you have to understand. The primarily these three roles we have to understand: job roles, duty roles, data roles. Okay, these are the primary roles which we'll be using when we work on the application, okay, for data access. So here, any questions from anyone, please? So the EBS
So abstract
points we
role
are
is
comparing
something
with this.
related
Sorry.
to like the abstract role that you're saying every user will be assigned with a role
Yeah.
by default. So it's something related with the HR role. Or I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
See, when you say abstract role, example is employee, employee or contingent worker. So every user,
Yeah,
the system is employee only, right?
yeah. So that's what
Client
like
point of.
the HR role
Yeah,
you
HR
have
role, yes.
current.
HR role. When you say employee, yes, definitely HR role. Okay. Okay. Any other questions here, please?
In case of responsibilities, we can exclude submenus, or to create a custom responsibility, we can exclude submenus and functions, right? So here also, is there any possibility of creating custom roles?
Yes. Yes. So in EBS, we can create the custom menus as per our requirement. In Fusion, we can create custom roles. We can do that.
I think you'd be covering in the future.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe
definitely.
so.
We will see
So I
that.
mean,
We'll see how
my question is
to customize the role also. We'll go through.
no. My question is different. So you have buyer, right? So now the buyer will be removed from purchasing
So buyer
role.
is what you said?
The purchasing, you have currently buyer role, right?
Yeah,
User should be
buyer
assigned to
role
buyer.
we have. Yes, buyer we have.
So that so so user. So currently we have responsibility and separate responsibility, and the user should be assigned as buyer. But now both will be clubbed together, something like that. I'm sure that you'll be covering in your
Yeah,
purchasing
yeah, yeah,
system.
definitely. When we just see now, the buyer concept is mandatory even if you are working on financials in Fusion. So in case of EBS, if you are going to create the documents as a part of purchasing, then only we require buyer. To, st-
Yeah.
to work on accounts payable application in EBS, buyer is not required, but in the Fusion, they made it as a mandatory. What is the reason why the buyer is mandatory for the process? Those points will understand. Okay,
You're saying you'll be
we'll be
covering.
covering that point. But if
Okay,
I
fine.
just start with that point
Because
to
you joined the
understand.
role, so that is also a role. So I was just trying to correlate between these two.
Yeah, the role we have to assign. The role we have to assign. Apart from that, we have one more concept called as procurement agent classification. There are 2 points when you talk about buyer. Okay,
Okay.
so we'll talk about it. We'll talk about maybe in today's session, or if not today, by tomorrow session we'll be covering the point.
Okay, fine.
Okay, that will be covering as a part of employee user. I think yes, we just mentioned users related Fusion users. As a part of Fusion users, we'll talk about it. Okay. Yep. So any questions here, please? Okay. Any questions from anyone, please? In EBS, what we do? A responsibility we assign to user. In Fusion, what we are going to do? role we are going to assign to user. So we don't assign just plain responsibility to user. To that responsibility we assign primary ledger or operating unit, depending on which responsibility that is. So the responsibility we are creating against which application, based on that we assign primary ledger or operating units. In the same way here also, in Fusion also, the primary ledger or business unit we assign to role, that role will assign to user. See, there is similarity. To responsibility, user can have access to application functionality in EBS, but in the Fusion, instead of responsibility, through role user will have access to application and specific data which is related to primary ledger or business unit. Okay, these points we have to understand. Okay, this combination, this role is nothing but job role. Okay, here which role will be assigning to the user, that role is job role. And the combination of this job role and primary ledger or business unit. Okay, so this we call as data role. So that means this specific role is going to have access to this primary ledger or business unit related data. So this combination we call as data role. The same if you want to compare with EBS, this combination, once you assign primary ledger or operating into particular responsibility, so to which responsibility you already assigned primary ledger or operating into EBS, that responsibility you can call as data role. That means the responsibility will have access to the specific OU data or primary ledger data. So that task, once you assign primary ledger or operating it to particular responsibility in EBS, that combination equal to that combination what we are going to have in the Fusion, that combination we are calling as a data role. Okay, so these are the points we have to understand. Any questions here, please? The same we'll see in the system, okay, so that it would be more clear. Before that, just to introduce what are the different type of roles we have and how those are connected, to understand we are discussing these points. Okay, so we have job roles, duty role, abstract data roles and abstract roles, and only we can assign the job roles to user. Remember this point. In EBS also, if you remember, only you can assign the menu to responsibility. Can we assign submenu to responsibility? Anyone please? Can you select submenu into responsibility in EBS? I'm just talking about EBS.
I think no.
No. If you want to give the access to specific user through responsibility for specific submenu, what we have to do? Against the submenu, we have to create the menu.
Menu, custom menu.
Yeah, you have to create the custom menu. Even if you want to give the access to specific function also, you have to create the submenu menu only, custom menu. With the menu only you can select into responsibility. In the same way, in Fusion also, if you want to give access to anything for any user, that is possible only through job role. Okay, here say duty role. Say for example, job role I am taking. Okay, the same information I'll take here. Say we have a job role called as payables manager, and duty role called as invoice creation is one duty, and payment creation is another duty role. This is how we can have a duty roles. Now user requirement is only invoice creation. Invoice creation is one of the duty role in Fusion. Now we cannot assign this invoice creation duty role to user. By taking this, we have to create the job role. Within the job role, we have to create like this. Okay, invoice creation job role. Within that job role, we have to select duty role called as invoice creation. Okay, now this you can assign to user. This invoice creation job role you can assign to user. Within that, we'll have a duty role. So duty roles directly you cannot provision to the user. That means duty roles directly you cannot allow the users to have access. The duty roles, if you want to specific duty role access, if you want to give it to specific user, that can be done with the help of job roles only. Okay, so these are the points to understand. Any questions here, please? If no questions, we can move to next topic. Fine, no questions. Now we'll talk about the version based differences, and before that we'll talk about this. We discuss 4 type of roles we have. So job roles are seeded. Okay, here the job roles are seeded. So within the however, the menus, we get seeded menus for each and every application when you take the product license from Oracle. So for payables, receivables, cash management, fixed asset, GL, and many other applications, we find seeded menus, right, which will have a specific application related functionality. In the same way, Fusion.
Lakshman, I have a question.
Please.
Sorry. See, you said we have to, for any user, if you have to assign, we have to create job roles and all that, right? So user is user in Fusion also?
One point. If you want to give access to any user, for duty role, you have to create the job role against that. If you want to give the access to specific job role for any user, you don't need to create. Job roles directly you can assign. If you want to give access to duty role, you cannot assign duty role directly to any user. Okay. If you have a requirement of giving access to invoice creation duty for specific user, for against this duty, you have to create the job
like
role.
Creating your own job roles, right? Customizing your own job roles.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. In EBS, we create our custom menus, right?
Yeah. But we also have we have user concept in EBS. How is it carried to Fusion? It's the same like users we can have, or
same. The same point we are going to discuss as a next topic. Now we are talking about role-based access control. Once we're done with this, we'll just move on to this Fusion users. How those are similar or different. Okay, we'll understand.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Fine. Okay. So here, when you talk about these roles, job roles are seeded. Okay, job roles are seeded. If you want to create custom job roles, yes, you can create. And what about duty roles? Okay, duty roles also you can find as a seeded. And if you want to create the custom duty roles, yes, you can create. Data roles. Okay, data roles. What does it mean by data role? Data role is nothing but the combination of job role and business unit or primary ledger, right? That is the point we are discussing when I talk about Fusion. So data role is equal to job role and primary ledger or business unit, this combination. So if you assign primary ledger to GL related job role, that is equal, that we call as data role. That why we are calling as data role? This is job role. This job role is going to have access to specific primary ledger. Primary ledger here we treat as a data, specific entity data. So that is the reason the job role plus the primary ledger combination you can call as data role. So with this role is connected with the specific primary ledger, means specific data it got connected. If not primary ledger, say you have one job role called as payables manager. For that you are assigning business unit, nothing but operating unit as per EBS. When you assign this business unit, okay, when you assign this business unit to payables manager job role, the job role is connecting with the BU, particular BU. Here the BU, what are the BU you have, against the BU what are the transactions you create, that is nothing but data. So that is the reason we have role. Which role? Job role. Once job role is connected to specific BU or primary ledger, so that is called as a data role. That means the combination of job role and business unit, or the combination of job role and primary ledger we call as data role. So data roles can be created by system automatically. Just remember this point. So job roles are seeded, duty roles are seeded. If required, we can create our own job roles and duty roles, custom job roles and custom duty roles. When I talk about data roles, what does it mean by data role? Data role means the combination of job role and primary ledger, or the combination of job role and business unit, or the combination of job role and maybe inventory organization. Or other example you can take, data role means the job role plus your corporate book when I talk about fixed assets. Okay, these are the points we have to understand. To job role, if you are going to assign anything, that could be primary ledger or business unit or inventory organization or your budget. When I talk about GL, budget, or if you are going to assign your corporate book or tax book to any job role, that combination is called as a data role. Okay, data roles are created by system automatically. Okay, say system creates data roles. System creates data roles. How system creates data roles? When system creates a data role. Okay. So when you create the primary ledger, automatically system will create GL related job roles. When you create the primary ledger, system will create GL related GL data roles automatically. When you create the business unit, automatically system will create BU specific application related job roles. We'll take example as AP. Yeah, when we talk about core financials, we know the AP and AR only will be standing at business unit level or operating net level. When I talk about FA will be standing at ledger, cash management at LE level. So that's how we have. So when I talk about core 5 financial modules, out of that, these two only will be mapped at OU level or say BU level. So whenever you create the business unit for financials, for AP and AR applications, automatically system will create the data roles. Okay, so that means when you create the primary ledger or business unit, automatically system will create the data roles. So this happens up to release 11 only. Up to release 11 version. From release 12, they change the game. From release 12, okay, whatever you have in release 12, the same continued in release 13 now. From release 12, what happens is, when you create the primary ledger, system won't create any data roles. When you create the business unit, system won't create any data roles. What we have to do is, we have to assign the primary ledger to specific job role. And when you create the business unit you want to assign to which job role we have to assign. Okay, so up to release 11, that means release 8 or say release 7, release, or else you can go with the prior, any version you can take prior versions. In release 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 up to 11, what happens is, okay, basically we have these 4 type of roles: job, duty, data and abstract roles. The data roles concept, what happens is, whenever you create your primary ledger or business unit, so automatically system will create data roles. That means automatically system will assign primary ledger to all GL related roles. Since the primary ledger is mapped, the GL is mapped at primary ledger only. And whenever you create the business unit, the business unit will get assigned to all the job roles automatically, which job roles are specific to BU specific applications. So that means up to release 11, data roles are created by system automatically. From release 12, in release 12 or the current version release 13, there is no data roles concept. There is no data roles concept. When you create the primary ledger, system won't assign that primary ledger to specific job roles automatically. In the same way, when you create the business unit, system is not going to assign that business unit to any job role. So the primary ledger access is required for which job role, the business unit access is required for which job role, we have to go and assign through manual process. So this is a point we have to understand. When you talk about abstract role, that remains same, no changes. So only out of these 4 roles, up to release 11 we have these 4 type of roles, and from release 12 there is no role called as data role. So whatever system do automatically, that we have to do through manual process. Okay, because there are many issues, okay, which are experienced because of the data roles creation. The unnecessary data roles creation happens, and that is the reason just they just remove that logic of data roles creation, and now that task we have to perform through manual process, which is similar to our EBS. Say you create primary ledger, and the primary ledger we assign to responsibility in EBS. Manually we do it, right? When we create the primary ledger in EBS, system won't assign the primary ledger to responsibility automatically. We have to assign. In the same way, when you create operating unit, the operating unit we have to assign to OU specific responsibility. In the same way in Fusion, from release 12, okay, when you create the primary ledger, we have to assign to specific job role. And when you create the business unit, that we have to assign to specific job role. So now we have to perform these through manual process till release 11. The assignment, primary ledger business unit assignment to specific job role are automated. For that we use concept called as role template. Okay, role template, for example GL role template. That means within the template we have to list out how many roles we have for GL. Say we have role 1, okay, role 1, role 2, role 3. So GL role template, we have to list out how many roles we have for GL. Whenever we create the primary ledger, system will go and verify how many roles are there in the GL role template. For all the roles it will assign the primary ledger. The same way for each and every application, we can have a separate role templates. Within the role templates, the application specific roles you can assign. So with the help of role template, system can create data roles automatically. These points are applicable up to release 11. Now from release 12, we don't have any concept called as data roles. Equal to data roles, we have to assign our primary ledger to job role, our business unit to job role, our inventory organization to specific job role, or else our corporate book or tax book to specific job role. Okay, this is how we have to do the manual assignment. However, we assign our primary ledgers operating unit to responsibilities with the help of profile options. In EBS, we assign primary ledger or operating unit to responsibility by using the profile options. In Fusion, if you want to assign your primary ledger to job role or your business unit to job role, we no need to use any profile options. Without profile options concept, we can assign primary ledgers and business unit to specific job roles. How to perform that we'll see as a part of system work. Okay, so when we start working on the system, once we are ready with the primary ledgers and business unit, we'll go through that process. Okay, any questions here, please? So any questions to understand these points, please? Fine, no questions. Okay. Yeah, please.
So Lakshman, yeah. So these versions you are mentioning, that is for cloud version or Oracle version?
Cloud versions. These are cloud versions only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Fine. These are cloud versions. And one more point here, when you talk about version, okay, when you say release 11, release 12, release 13, how that can be identified? It's very simple. See, you know EBS, in EBS we have 11i version. Okay, when I talk about 11i, within that we have a sub versions. So 11.5.7, right? 11.5.10, okay, 11.5.10.2. This is the last version where Oracle stopped the 11i related releases, right? The same way when you talk about R12 EBS, we are talking about EBS. In EBS we have many versions, right? So release 12 means 12.1.3. We have prior many other versions also, but we are not listing out all those. Just to understand how the version is considered in Fusion, to understand that point I am taking these simple examples. So 12.1.3, say, and 12.12.1.4, and say 12.2.0, okay, 12.2.4. This is how we have versions. Here release 12 means, so we are calling as, like in EBS, release 12 means that can be any version, right? We call it release 12. Release 12 means here it is referred the actual series 12.13, 12.14, 12.20, 12.24, all will be represented as a release 12. Here release 12 means the series we are representing here, this 12. The 11i means it could be 11.5.7 or 11.5.10 or 11.10.2. It can be anything that we call as 11i. When you go with the detailed actual version, these are the actual versions which we can identify that. But here in 11i and release 12, the series here we are taking, the series only we are taking into release name, but in the Fusion it is slightly different. So if you say 11 release 11 in Fusion applications, okay, these are related to EBS. When I talk about Fusion, if somebody is saying I'm working on release 11, what is the meaning of that? What is the actual version? The actual version is 11 point, okay, 1.11.1.0. So here where is 11? Which 11 they are representing as a release 11? This 11 we normally represent with a version. If somebody says I am working on release 12, Fusion release 12, Fusion Cloud release 12, what is the meaning of that? Here, this is the 12 we have to understand. I am working on Fusion release 12 means this is the actual version. 11.1.12.1.0. This is the version which we take into consideration. If somebody, the latest version is release 13. When you look at the release 13, the actual version, how you can see, here is the 13. That means if you notice Fusion, the series is 11. The actual Fusion version is 11G. We have a 11G database also. That is a database version. The same way Fusion applications version is 11G. Okay, we know where we use I am working on 11G. 11G means Fusion applications. Within that version means the series will be 11 only for any upcoming versions also. But the actual release can be addressed here. Okay, release 12 means 11.1.12. We don't say I am working on 11.1.12. Simply say 12. Where is the 12? Here is the 12. Okay, we don't have 12 here, similar to EBS 11 and release 12. So this is the point we have to understand. Hope this is clear to everyone. Okay, so release 13 means this is the actual version 11.1.13. This is the 13. This is the number which we take into version. If tomorrow Oracle is going to release 14, okay, You can identify by seeing the version this way. So the series will remain 11 only. For Fusion applications, the actual version is 11G. So that is the reason, since Fusion applications version is 11G, that always will take as a series. With 11 series, within the 11 series you can find the versions 11, 12, 13, 14. Prior to that 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, all versions we have. Okay, so that's how we
So
have.
beginning with 11.1 and ending with 1.0, that is constant.
Yes,
Always.
yes. In future they may change this, because if they are not focusing on this release within the 14, if they are very minute changes, instead of going with release 14, release 15, they may just do some changes that they may note it as a okay
Okay.
14.1.1.
Okay. So for now they didn't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
But till now.
No. They are not just going with some subversion. It's always here you can see the version number
Okay.
11, 12, 13. So future version would be 14. No, nowhere we have a 14. The current latest version is release 13. Release 13 means this is how you can find. Anyway, I'll show you in the instance also. If you have access to instance, how to go and verify, okay, which version of instance is that. That I'll take you through.
Yeah. And in general, how many versions they are doing every year?
See, because they started from the with a series of 11.0 version. So in the previous, prior to that, say this application primarily you can see as stabilized from last 2 years. Prior to that, very frequently they used to move to one to another version. The reason, adding some new functionalities or introducing some new applications as a part of Fusion solution, and bug fixing and many other technology related upgrades, etc. So now almost it is stabilized. Now you have release 13. If any possibility from their end, you may see release 14 by end of this year, or else maybe next year. You cannot expect
Okay.
in the next month or within 2-3 months release 14 will come into the market. Okay, that because the release 13 is very much stabilized now. Even 12 also very much stabilized, because when we talk about these versions, we should not focus on specific area of application. The version, when you talk about, they consider complete solution, right?
Correct.
So with that consideration, they'll come up with a version. See, today we have 13. Tomorrow, if they are going to come up with the 14, we don't need to think about in 14 what are the changes for financials. There may be changes, may not be changes, even very minor. There may be some changes, or there may be some new applications which are related to specific area of the this product, right? So
Yeah.
that's how we can find out. So when you see release 11 and 12, so primarily these are the changes for any applications. Here up to release 11, we have this data roles concept. Okay, data roles concept we have up to release 11. From in release 12, they completely remove data roles concept. So whatever system do automatically, that should be done by us. And in release 12, what that is a big difference between release 11 and 12. So between 12 and 13, what is the big difference? We don't see major differences. The security concept, the rollback. Okay, Fusion security in release 12 means you have to understand there is no data roles concept. When you say Fusion security in release 11, the point here we have to understand, we have a data role concept where system creates the data roles. That is the primary difference. Apart from that, we have a few differences. Anyway, those will come across. So any questions here, please? Okay, the target is we should understand, okay, what we should understand. So any sort of questions you can ask.
Right now, you're saying that the Fusion application, they're using 11G version, right? So
we should not
is there any
use the
relation
term
between
also for discussions. Just for your understanding purpose, I'm just giving this point. So if you are going to refer somewhere Fusion applications are using the 11G, people even they are working, they'll find as that is new. Because you can see as per documentation, I'll take you through once we start with the system, but you just ignore that 11G and all the term. Nowhere we have to use when you say the version is release 11 or 12 or 13. Frankly speaking, few people you may find they are not aware the actual series of version is 11G. That I'll show you in the system also, but don't take this point for any discussions. Always we have to use release 11 or 12 or 13. Okay, fine. So any questions, please? So no questions. Any questions from anyone, please?
Lakshman sir, I have one question.
Please, please.
Currently, Fusion application with database is using 11G or
11G only, 11G. The
okay.
grid technology, grid database. I think in the latest version, I think they are using 12C. We will check it. We'll check it. It won't make big difference, functional friend. So I'll take you through that. I'll show you from where you can see the database version and application version once we get into the instance. Okay, in the previous release they are using 11G, and I think in the 13 they are using 12C database version, which is very latest. Fine. Any other questions, please? So this is all about the roles which you have to understand. Okay, job roles, duty roles, data roles, abstract roles. If you are going to work on the latest versions, you have to forget about this data roles. Only three type of roles: job roles, duty roles, and abstract roles. Just abstract role is just one role, which is a common role, which is required for every user who will be accessing the system. So that will have some additional privileges, common privileges that I'll show you. But as of now, just remember, employee role we call as abstract role. Okay, or contingent worker comes under abstract role. And here the duty roles will be part of job role. Job role is the one which will be assigning to any user. Okay, these are the points we have to understand. You compare with EBS, these are the points. Okay, so job role is equal to EBS menu, duty role is equal to EBS submenus. Okay, the data role is equal to the combination of the operating unit or primary ledger association with a particular responsibility. Okay, that's how here also. So what we do, we assign primary ledger here where we discuss that point. Say we assign primary ledger to job role. This job role will assign to user. If the job role is related to GL, we assign primary ledger to that job role that will assign to user. In the same way, BU we assign to job role. That job role will assign to specific user. Similar to EBS only. So EBS, what we do, primary ledger we assign to responsibility. Responsibility will assign to user. Here instead of responsibility, job role. That's it. So why we are using the responsibility in EBS? Without responsibility, you cannot provision the user to have access to menu. Can you assign menu to user directly? No. Through responsibility only you can do it. That is the reason we are doing. And one more point. So we can provision, we can give the access to any user for specific reports through request group. The request group also will be selecting within the responsibility. But in Fusion, okay, within the job role, you can list out the specific duty roles or specific functions or privileges and reports also. That means we can include everything into job role only. In EBS, within the responsibility, we'll have menu and request group, right? Menu to have access to submenus or functions, and request group to give the access to specific programs or reports. Okay, so within the responsibility will be selecting menu as well as request group, so that from that responsibility user can have access to relevant submenus and functions, and what are the reports or programs are listed in the request group which is associated with the responsibility, user can have access from that responsibility. In the Fusion, these two are not separate. Okay, this everything you can include in the job role itself. You don't need to create separate object to list out the reports. Reports you can include in the job role, as well as the duty roles and functions. Everything you can include within the job role only, or else everything you can include in the duty role. Duty role you can assign to you can take into job role definition. That's it. Any question here, please? Okay, similar to request group, you don't have anything in Fusion. Through request group, what we can do, we can group the reports or programs to give access to particular responsibility. But in the Fusion, that can be duty role or specific privilege, or it could be some report or some program name. Everything we can include in the job role, or else everything you can include in the duty role. Okay, all we can include in one definition itself. So any questions here, please? No questions. Okay, that's all about role-based access control, which we call as RBAC. Compared to release 11, there are some changes in release 13. The primary difference is no data roles concept from release 12. The same is continued in 13 also. Now we'll talk about Fusion users. Okay, we'll talk about Fusion users. In Fusion, the users are classified into two types. The users are classified into two types. Those are implementation user. The other user type is employee user, or you can say application user. Normally we use this term, employee user. So before we talk about these two type of users, we'll see what is the process we follow in EBS. In EBS, what we do is we create user and we'll create employee. That employee we can assign to user, right? We create user, we'll go and create the employee. Okay, that employee will assign to user. So in Fusion, so we don't do in this way. In EBS, you can create user separately and employee separately. That employee you can associate with the user. But in the Fusion, the users can be created as implementation user or employee user, or say application user. So what does it mean by implementation user? In Fusion applications, okay, in Fusion applications, if you want to create any employee user, so to create the employee user, first we'll talk about employee user so that we can understand why implementation user is required. Okay, if you want to create the real user, or say employee user or application user, to create the user, what we need is we require primary ledger and business unit. Or just say why I'm writing primary ledger, there is a reason that we'll talk about. Let me take direct point. We require legal entity and business unit. Without legal entity and business unit, you cannot create user in Fusion applications. Which user you cannot create without legal entity and business unit? That user is employee. Okay, you cannot create any employee user in the Fusion applications without legal entity and business unit. So when we have access to fresh instance, when you have access to fresh instance, within the fresh instance, we cannot find some sample definitions for legal entity business unit. When you say we require business unit, so the business unit should be associated with the primary ledger. Even legal entity also should be associated with the primary ledger. So when we need legal entity and primary ledger, okay, definitely we need primary ledger also. When we need legal entity and business unit, definitely we require primary ledger. Primary ledger we don't select into user definition, but that is required, right? These legal entity and business units need to be mapped with the primary ledger only. Okay, definitely that is required, but let's ignore it for now. So when we create the employee user in the system, for user creation, without selecting the legal entity and business unit, BU, okay, as per EBS operating unit, OU. Okay, without selecting these two definitions, you cannot create a user. So that is the reason what we do is in fresh instance is not at all possible. If you want to create new user in the fresh instance, you have to create legal entity and business unit. So that is the reason, since there is no possibility to create the employee user directly in the Fusion instance, what we do is without selecting legal entity and business unit, we can create the user in the Fusion applications. That user only we call as implementation user. Okay, we can create user in the Fusion applications without selecting legal entity and business unit. That user we call as implementation user. Just for implementation purpose, we can create user. Say we will go and create user called as XYZ. Okay, we created. Which user we are creating? Implementation user. What is the difference between the implementation user and employee user? If you want to create the employee user, we require legal entity and business unit. So without legal entity and business unit, if you want to create the user, that we call as implementation user. Can we assign employee to implementation user? No. Okay. If you have an employee.
Lakshman, I have a question here.
Yeah.
You said abstract role is nothing but a user in Oracle. So how is it different from employee user again? Are we talking about abstract role now?
See, employee user, the user which will be used by employee, that is employee user. Okay.
Okay.
Role means which will have some privileges. This is just user login purpose. Okay. That is role which will have some privileges.
Okay.
Yep. Fine. We'll get more clarity on that. We have to see once. So still, I mean, there are a few points which will get connected automatically for our understanding. Okay. So for now, just that is a simple difference. Okay. So user. Okay. If any employee need access to the system, whatever the username we create, that is employee user. That is a completely role. Okay. Normally, employees require which access that can be given by employee role. Which employees require login credentials to the system, that is employee user. Fine. So if you create an implementation user, you cannot assign employee to that implementation user. And employee user or application user is nothing but the definition itself, employee plus user. That means employee user is nothing but against employee will create the user that we call as employee user. When you are creating the employee user, we have to select legal entity and business unit. Without legal entity and business unit, we cannot create the employee user in the system. But to create the implementation user, okay, we don't require any definition. Just you can go and provide username and password, then implementation user will be ready. Okay, the difference is employee user can be associated with the specific employee. That within the name itself you can see employee user. That means the user which we call as employee user always will be mapped with the employee. That will always refer some employee. When you talk about implementation user, just implementation user. You may use that user for implementation purpose. Okay, you cannot associate, okay, any employee with implementation user. So normally we use implementation user at the time of implementation. When we get a fresh instance access from Oracle, so we cannot create employee user. The reason in the first instance we cannot find our LEs and BUs, right? So till we go and create employee legal entities and business units, our own legal entities and business units, okay, we'll be using employee user definition only in the system. Okay, so if you want to create implementation user, that you can create from security console, and if you want to create employee user, that you can create from HCM application, human capital management, which is equal to HRMS. So here the security console, which is equal to our EBS sysadmin. Okay, the system administrator in EBS, you can create users the same way in Fusion. The employee users you can create from security console. Just for our understanding, security console is equal to EBS sysadmin. Within the security console only we can create the users, and you can set the password, and you can give some roles access. In EBS what we do, so we create user and we assign the responsibilities to the user through sysadmin. Here equal to responsibilities we have roles. So through security console only we can assign any role to user in Fusion applications. Okay, so this is the first point we have to understand, why we have to create implementation user in fresh instance. Okay, we cannot have any sample definitions as LEs and BUs till we go and create. Yeah, please.
Yeah, can an employee be assigned to multiple BUs?
One employee can be assigned to multiple BUs at the time of employee user creation. Only you can select one BU. Later what you can do is you can assign, you want to give access to that employee for which roles. For those roles you can assign multiple BUs. That means the employee can be associated with the multiple business units through roles.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. In EBS, if I ask you the question, can one user can have access to multiple operating units?
Yes.
How?
He can be given multiple responsibilities.
Yeah. Through responsibility, user can have access to multiple operating units in EBS. Okay, let me mute. I'm getting some noise. Through responsibility, user can have access to multiple operating units. In Fusion, through roles, user can have access to multiple business units. But the difference is, in EBS, when you create the user, we don't select any operating unit as a part of user definition. But in the Fusion, when you create the employee user, you have to select business unit. One business unit you have to select. But the actual real privileges can be given to any user through roles only. Just as a part of definition for system understanding, we have to give it. So where that, if you are giving the business unit at the time of employee user creation, in which applications that would be reflecting, we'll discuss when we are just working on the application. For now, just remember the point. So one BU we have to assign to one user, minimum one BU as a mandatory. So you can give the access to multiple BUs for any user through roles concept. Say you are assigning BU1 to user creation time, and you are giving access to the same user for BU2 specific role, which will have high precedence. Whatever the BU you are assigned to the user through role only, that will have high precedence. And where this BU can be useful, whatever you are selecting at user creation time, that we'll discuss. If you need quick answer, in Fusion Expense, that BU can be used. We'll see that as a part of our configuration process. So just for information, you may just make a note. Any questions here, please?
So this employee user is something like the person in HRMS.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's actually not the user. So what you're saying is you can create an employee, you can create a user in security console, and later on you can go into the HCM application and assign that user to an employee.
No.
Is that right?
No. That's wrong.
So you have two different consoles to create
Exactly.
implementation
These two are different
and
functions. Okay. So employee. Yeah, please go ahead.
user cannot be changed as employee user.
Yeah, implementation user cannot be created as employee user.
I mean, cannot be converted as employee user.
Yes. Converter cannot be converted. You cannot map employee with implementation user. Okay.
I think once you show it, I think I can.
Yes.
have a clear understanding.
But before that, just till that time, you may just take this point. Implementation user cannot be associated with any employee. Okay. So when you are
I mean, I
creating,
can create an employee in HCM and then associate that user ID to this employee, right?
sorry,
Cannot we do? I can create an employee
create
for
employee in
so it's
HCM.
something like a flag that doesn't allow to do it, or
No.
I didn't get it because both are users. So only thing is
Both are
that
users.
trying to assign it.
I got your point. Both are users, but which users are not associated with employee users, those only will create from security console. Okay, that's how they just segregated.
So once you create the user in security console, you cannot assign an employee. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
You cannot assign an employee. You cannot make it as an.
Yes, the
So
user
any,
is
any user, like if you say some buyer or any payables manager or something like that in the company, you have to go into HCM module and then create a user from there, not from security console.
Yes, not from security console, from HCM only. So what are the users? One point here. What are the users you create in HCM? Those will be available in the security console to assign the roles.
Okay.
Okay, that means security console to manage the users, but not to create the employee users, just to create implementation users. Implementation users and employee users you can find in the security console for role assignments.
Right. So you are saying in DBA currently what we are doing is we create a user and then we create a person in HRMS and then assign a person to a user.
No.
That's how the
No,
employee mapping is.
one second. When you are creating the user, when you are creating the employee in the HCM, okay.
No, I'm talking about the regular Oracle R12.
Oh,
so
yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, you're creating a person. That's how you're creating a HRMS employee, and then assigning the person using the sysadmin for a user.
Correct.
So that's how you're linking the employee.
Manually we are mapping, right? Manually we are mapping. That is not possible in the Fusion. That's it.
So they have changed it, like they have to create a user directly in HRMS instead of creating a system.
What they did is, let me tell you that simple point. What they did is, when you are creating the employee user, when you are creating the employee, they given one field called as username. If you provide the name for that user, say you are creating an employee, you want to give the access to that employee to access the application also. In that case, you can provide the username for that employee, then that user you call as employee user. That means the user is created against employee. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry, there was some network issue. It got disconnected.
Yeah. Okay. Now.
Yeah, great. Fine. Okay. So I'm not sure whether.
How long is the meeting going to be?
Sorry?
This call. How long is the session going to last?
Yeah, maybe 5 more minutes. That's all. We'll wind up.
Okay.
Fine. Okay, so this is a point we have to understand. So when you create the employee in HCM, within the employee definition itself, you can find one field called as username. If you want to give the access to that employee to have access to the application, you can provide the username. Otherwise, you can ignore it. So you have 100 employees. 100 employees may not require access to the application. So out of 100, 10 users, 10 employees required access to application. In that case, only for 10 employee creation time, you can give the username. With that username, they can have access to the instance application. So that's how it will work. Okay. So why we are creating the implementation user? We cannot create employee user directly. That is the reason we are creating implementation user first. With the help of implementation user, we can do all the setups, including legal entities, business units, and all other setups. Once we are ready with these definitions, then that would be right time to create employee user. The reason to create employee user, we require this. Without these, you cannot create. That is the reason first we'll create implementation user. With that, we'll start doing the system configuration. Once we are ready with this, you can create the employee user. The same we will be doing in our classes also. In case of fresh instance, what approach we follow, the same will follow here. Any questions, please?
In R12, we have multiple org access control, the demo security profile, and
yeah, we have in Fusion also. It's our voice is going. So yes, answer is yes. The same is possible in Fusion also. We can create the security profile. Okay, through security profile, you can provision the access to multiple business units through specific role. In EBS, through responsibility, right? From single responsibility, you can give the access to multiple operating units or specific operating unit. You can limit to 2 or 3 or 10 or 20. Okay, but in EBS we have two security profiles: global security profile and security profile. We know security profile. So to have access to the operating units which are under same BZ, when you talk about global security profile, you can provision the access to operating units which are belongs to different BZs. Here we don't have BZ concept. We don't have these two type of security profiles here. Security profile means just organization security profile. There is no classification. Any BZ, any BU you can select into that. We'll be working on that. We have that concept as a part of our course curriculum. Okay, we'll be just executing in our classes. We'll do the required setups and we'll be testing. Okay.
So Lakshman sir, I have one question.
Please.
So in Fusion, why they are differentiating implementation user and employee user? Is there any specific reasons for it?
Yeah, there is one specific reason. There is specific reason. Because of these users, they'll have a certain additional privileges. There is one more point. If I start that, it may take some time. So there are certain activities only employee user can perform and implementation user cannot perform. That we will discuss in the tomorrow session, and we'll continue from there to next topic. Okay. So if you want to work on tables, we require employee user as a mandatory. If you want to work on procurement, 100% is a mandatory. We require employee user. Okay. The reason we'll discuss in tomorrow's session. How these two are different in terms of accessing the.
Employee user can start the setups.
Yeah, any
he will.
I'll ask you one question. So in EBS, I have ABC user. I'm sorry, and XYZ user. In EBS, I'm talking about. We have two users. Which user can start with the setups? Which user can do the setups? Possible, please answer. These are not seeded users in EBS. I am just talking about. Say we have two users in EBS. One has XYZ. Who can do the system configuration? Who can do the implementation related setups?
If user is having setup responsibility and associated with primary ledger.
Which responsibility required?
Setup responsibility.
Yeah, what is that? What is that? Anyone, please?
It's called
sorry?
Implementation.
Sorry?
Yeah, I mean sysadmin.
That's it. Sysadmin. Say
implementation.
ABC user has access to system administrator responsibility. Then ABC user can do the implementation. We can start with all the responsibilities creation, profile options, location creation, business group creation, primary ledgers, operating units, and everything ABC user can create. If the same responsibility if you are going to assign to XYZ user, XYZ user also can do. In the same way, however, we have system administrator responsibility which allows the user to do the required implementation related configuration. In the same way, in the Fusion also we have a separate roles. Okay, separate roles. If you assign those roles to that user can do the application configuration. The role you can assign to any user, implementation user or employee user. So if you assign that role to implementation user can do the implementation related configuration. If you assign the same role to employee user, the employee user can do the required configuration. Okay, these 2 points we'll discuss in the tomorrow session, which roles required when we do the implementation and how these two users are totally different in terms of application access. Okay, what are the points we have to consider when we deal with these two users? Those 2 points we'll discuss in tomorrow's session. After that, we'll just jump into next topic called as what is the Fusion architecture we have in the Fusion applications. Then we'll talk about Fusion enterprise structure. Along with that, we'll talk about FSM. Okay, functional setup manager. So in tomorrow's session we'll talk about a few other Fusion user related points. Then we'll talk about these 3 topics. Then after completing this, then we can start with the system. We'll see how to create the user and how to create the project. Okay, what are the other points we have to understand prior to that? We'll start working on the system maybe after tomorrow's session. Okay, in tomorrow's session we'll talk about few more points which are related to Fusion users, and then we'll go with these topics. After these, we may spend time tomorrow's session also for these topics. After that, we can directly jump into the instance. So any questions from anyone on today's session or yesterday's session or related to this course, please.